Since 1779, the Old Talbott Tavern in Bardstown, Kentucky, has been taking in weary travelers. But once those heavy wooden doors shut out the modern world, they lock away centuries of dark history. The building itself feels designed to trap secrets. The original foundation rests behind 2-foot-thick stone walls, built with Flemish bond masonry, a heavily layered brickwork technique meant for extreme durability. Above, massive, aged ceiling timbers press down on the rooms below. Over 2.5 centuries, that heavy architecture served as a frontier crossroads for pioneering generals and violent outlaws and exhausted presidents, including Abraham Lincoln, who sought refuge within its walls. When a physical space absorbs that much human transit and tragedy, a question naturally surfaces. Does a 200-year-old building actually become haunted, or does the sheer weight of its folklore simply overpower the human imagination? Let's look at a recent stay by a travel writer who checked into a room called the General's Quarters. He woke up at 3:35 in the morning in a freezing room. Down the hall, he heard heavy doors slamming shut and the unmistakable sound of footsteps pacing the stairs of an entirely empty wing. It sounds like a terrifying paranormal encounter, but there is a major biological catch. This checklist compares his reported supernatural phenomena against clinical biology. On the left are his paranormal symptoms, sudden extreme chills and auditory anomalies. On the right, the clinical symptoms of an infected tick bite paired with heavy bourbon intoxication, two conditions he was actively suffering from that very night. A high fever combined with local Kentucky bourbon severely compromises the brain's ability to process reality. The freezing temperatures are internal, and those loud hallway noises could easily be exaggerated or entirely invented by an infected nervous system. This leaves us in a vacuum of proof. We have to determine if the Talbott Tavern is truly manifesting spirits, or if we are simply analyzing the hallucinations of a sick, drunk man. To untangle the folklore from the fever, we need to understand a psychological concept called priming. When you know a building has a deeply violent past, your brain is preloaded to misinterpret completely normal environmental noises as imminent threats, and the Talbott Tavern offers plenty of violent lore to prime that paranoia. The inn's most notorious patron was the outlaw Jesse James. Long before his reputation was romanticized, James was a cold-blooded killer who participated in Civil War-era massacres, including the slaughter of 200 men and boys in Kansas. Legend states that James was resting in his room at the tavern, deep into his bourbon, when he panicked. Whether he hallucinated an intruder or thought an 18th century French mural painted on the wall was moving, the ruthless outlaw drew his gun and fired directly into the plaster. If the oppressive atmosphere of this old inn could push a hardened killer into a frantic state of paranoia, a modern guest nursing a severe fever is completely defenseless against his own mind. The inn's factual history carries its own grim weight. In 1886, the property fell to George Talbott. Within a few short years, 6 of his children died inside the tavern's walls. One tumbled to his death down the central staircase, and a lovesick daughter took her own life. Keeping all of that tragic history in mind, let's return to our writer's 3:35 a.m. panic attack and apply some basic physics. This structural cross-section shows exactly what happens to 18th century architecture at night. As the outside temperature drops, the thick Flemish bond masonry and ancient ceiling timbers undergo rapid thermal contraction. The wood shifts, the heavy joints pop. Those loud snaps emit acoustic waves through the hollow halls, sounding exactly like heavy footsteps pacing the floorboards. By morning, the fever breaks, the room warms, and the architecture settling. The terror of the night vanishes once the laws of physics are viewed in the light of day. That logical safety net holds up perfectly, right until we check the public record. Buried in the comments section of that very writer's story, another guest named Hannah Quick leaves a highly detailed account of her own stay. Hannah's account acts as a sober control group. She and her partner were healthy, clear-headed, and verified by the manager as the only two guests registered in the entire building that night. Despite being perfectly healthy, they checked into the exact same general's quarters room and experienced the exact same unrelenting, unnatural cold. They heard the identical sounds of heavy doors slamming shut and heavy boots walking the stairs. Then Hannah's night escalated. Through the wall, she clearly heard the raucous sound of men laughing and carrying on, mimicking a loud card game. Here's the floor plan of the tavern. The room directly next to the general's quarters is the Jesse James room. At the time of her stay, that specific room was entirely sealed off and gutted by a recent fire. It was physically impossible for anyone to be inside. This breaks the rationals theory entirely. A biological hallucination caused by a tick-borne fever cannot be perfectly replicated by entirely healthy, independent subjects visiting on a different night. The final detail of Hannah's stay is the most unsettling. Seeking warmth, she stepped into the shower. She closed her eyes briefly to wash her hair, and when she opened them, she found a little girl staring directly at her through the shower curtain. She called out to her partner, and the girl vanished. This was a specific, unprompted visual manifestation that directly matches the historical data we established earlier, the localized, tragic deaths of the Talbott children in that very wing of the building. Psychology, thermal expansion, and a bad fever easily explain most of the bumps in the night. They give us a comfortable, logical shield against the unknown, but they fail completely when multiple, unlinked people corroborate the exact same sensory details of a centuries-old tragedy. At the Old Talbott Tavern, logic provides a comfortable shield until a stranger perfectly verifies your exact nightmare. Here, the ghost stories only truly begin